I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, troubling vote. The U.S. House passes a bill to codify same-sex unions. We're on Capitol Hill. Refusing service. A restaurant in Virginia turns away conservative Christians. We speak with the group's president. Diplomas denied. Religious liberty versus COVID vaccine rules at the US Naval Academy. And Immaculate Mary. The Holy Father delivers a message to the faithful about the Blessed Virgin. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you so much for being with us on the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. Our top story tonight, a bill to codify federal recognition of same-sex marriage passed the House today with 39 Republican votes. Last week, the Senate passed the Respect for Marriage Act thanks to 12 Republicans who supported the measure. The bill now makes its way to President Biden to be signed into law. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with the latest. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, House Democrats call the act a support for equality, fairness, and even love. But Republicans say that the legislation just really isn't needed because current law recognizes same-sex marriages. They also say it will infringe on religious liberties and possibly threaten Catholic and other faith-based organizations such as adoption agencies and even shelters.
Across the country, people of faith serve their neighbors and their communities through these charitable efforts. But this bill could force them to abandon their faith or abandon the service.
Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan says the bill is only a ploy by Democrats to satisfy their LGBTQ base and is an attack on marriage between one man and one woman.
The bill's implications: submit to our ideology or be silenced. This is yet another step toward the Democrats' goal of dismantling the traditional family, silencing voices of faith, and permanently undoing our country's God-woven foundation. This is the Democrats' priority.
The bill would repeal the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act. It would not require any state to allow same-sex couples to marry, but does require states to recognize any and all marriages, even those performed in other states.
We are on the cusp of a great bipartisan moral victory in the defense of a fundamental right of all Americans. A victory that will provide stability and reassurance to the millions of LGBTQ and interracial families.
Republicans say Democrats are out of step with what Americans want.
The Democrats are the party who think men can use women's restrooms. The Democrats are the party who think boys can participate in girls' sports. The Democrats are the party that think you can take the life of an unborn child right up until their birthday. And the Democrats are the party who actually had a witness in committee say that she thought men could get pregnant. And we're the ones who are out of step with, I mean, you got to be kidding me.
I tell you what. Well, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops urged lawmakers prior to the vote to vote against it. They said in part, quote, that it diminishes the sacredness and integrity of marriage in our society. President Biden is expected to sign the bill once it hits his desk. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In other news, a Virginia restaurant canceled the dinner reservations of a local faith-based organization, claiming the group's religious beliefs made their staff feel unsafe. Metzger's Bar and Butchery in Richmond, Virginia, canceled the Family Foundation of Virginia's 20-person reservation just an hour before the group's holiday party. The restaurant's owner says the Family Foundation limits the rights of women and the same-sex attracted community. And joining us tonight is Victoria Cobb, president of the Family Foundation of Virginia. Victoria, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. For those who are not familiar, would you tell us more about your group and also why you think the owners of Metzger's saw you all as a threat?
Yeah, well, it's super ironic that the owner's statement that he has put out is so all about being welcoming and tolerant, and yet their actions were so intolerant to Christians, to people who have faith-driven positions on issues like marriage and abortion, which is what my organization stands for.
Yeah, and I know it sounds like you had this reservation probably on the books for a while. At what point did the restaurant inform you they were canceling your reservation, and what was the explanation they gave you?
That's right. We had this reservation for a couple of weeks for a private room in their restaurant. And only an hour and a half before we would have arrived at their restaurant, they called a teammate of ours and let her know that they would not serve us. And they said that a wait staff, someone on their team, had looked us up, and the wait staff refused to serve us.
Wow, that is incredible. Actually, we actually reached out to the owners of the restaurant as well, and they say the Family Foundation seeks to deprive women and LGBTQ persons of basic human rights. The statement in part that they gave us said, we have always refused service to anyone for making our staff uncomfortable or unsafe, and this was the driving force behind our decision. Victoria, your reaction to that?
When it becomes unsafe for people of differing viewpoints to be in the same room together, simply to have a meal, in fact, not even expected to eat together, just to be in the same room, we really have a problem. Our America is extremely divided, and it's really tragic that this is the way the restaurant is approaching the differences we have on these issues, which are, for us, a matter of faith.
Yeah, and I'm curious, have you all ever experienced this type of treatment before?
We certainly have had other entities decide not to serve us. We had a data company decide that we weren't going to be a client because they didn't like our positions. We've had a website company tell us that they wouldn't design our website. So certainly, I think food service was the real shocking one, that waiters would make judgments about who enters and who they actually serve. I don't think most Americans want to see a political or religious litmus test at the door of a restaurant.
Yeah, and your story really has been making waves across that is national news. I'm curious, what kind of feedback or support have you been getting?
Well, yeah, of course, the reaction is mixed. We're getting lots of very intolerant, very hateful things sent to our team, but we're also getting lots of encouragement. I think most Virginians and Americans really believe that we want to see a society that tolerates all viewpoints, that respects people of faith, that as the charity to be willing to serve each other, especially in something as simple as a restaurant. So we've gotten some great reactions, some offers to eat and other facilities, other restaurants. So I think most people find this behavior by the restaurant rather shameful.
We have about a minute left or so, Victoria, but I'm curious, what comes next for you, and are you and your organization seeking any recourse?
Well, certainly there's lots of avenues on the table, and we're certainly evaluating that. Right now, I think what's great is that I think in the court of public opinion, people are weighing in and saying this is unacceptable behavior, that we don't want to have restaurants divided. Imagine a world where restaurants are based on your faith or based on your political viewpoints. I don't think anybody wants that. And so what's great about this moment is that people are hearing that there is really this hate and intolerance for people of faith, and they're rising up and reacting and saying, no, that's not what we want to see in our country.
Well, Victoria, thank you for coming on, speaking with us and speaking up. And we're going to continue to follow your story. God bless you.
Thanks for having me.
Our President Joe Biden added a surprise announcement to his public schedule this morning. He went before cameras to report WNBA star Brittney Griner had been released from prison in Russia following her drug conviction. A dramatic high-level prisoner exchange got her out. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, the swap had been in the making for months. The result, Brittney Griner is now free, and so is a jailed Russian arms dealer who was behind bars in the U.S. One person who is not free, American Paul Whelan, still being detained in Russia on espionage charges his family and the U.S. government say are baseless.
President Joe Biden reveals the deal he made with Russia to swap prisoners and secure WNBA star Brittney Griner's freedom.
This is a day we've worked toward for a long time. We never stopped pushing for her release.
In exchange, the U.S. handed over a convicted arms dealer nicknamed the Merchant of Death. The one-for-one trade fell short of freeing another American imprisoned in Russia, former Marine Paul Whelan.
We are not giving up. We will never give up. We remain in close touch with Paul's family, the Whelan family, and my thoughts and prayers are with them today. They have to have such mixed emotions today.
Brittney Griner's loved ones also feeling mixed emotions.
Today my family is whole, but as you all are aware, there's so many other families who are not whole.
The White House also revealing details about their pro-abortion meetings this week, where they strategized with Democratic state lawmakers and criticized pro-life opponents, writing, the participants also discussed the onslaught of unprecedented backwards policies being propagated by state Republican elected officials, including attacks against women's reproductive rights. Pro-life groups like Live Action counter, it is always wrong to kill an innocent child, period. Adding, the abortion industry doesn't care about women, it cares about money. Also today, President Biden announcing the infusion of nearly $36 billion to shore up a financially troubled union pension plan, the Central States Pension Fund. It'll prevent severe cuts to the retirement incomes of thousands of workers and retirees across the U.S.
It matters for their families. It matters for the country.
That pension infusion, by the way, comes from the American Rescue Plan. Separately tonight, the president says the passage of the Respect for Marriage Act is a, quote, critical step to ensure that Americans have the right to marry the person they love. Catholic bishops warn the act is, quote, a rejection of timeless truths about marriage. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Ukraine's government has announced sanctions targeting the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Security officials have searched hundreds of holy sites and questioned priests seeking evidence of ties to Moscow. The UOC declared independence from Russia earlier this year. Religious freedom advocates are calling for transparency as the sanctions are enforced. Iran says it has executed a man for involvement in anti-government protests. During courtroom testimony, witnesses accused the man of blocking a street and attacking a security official with a machete. The death sentence is the first known to be imposed by Tehran in connection with ongoing demonstrations against its morality police. In Peru, they have a new president. The country's former leader was ousted yesterday after trying to dissolve parliament. His vice president is now in charge. Dina Boluarte becomes the first female president in the country's history. The former leader was removed following a vote. He is now facing charges of starting a rebellion. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including questions at the US Naval Academy, where diplomas denied to midshipmen who sought religious exemptions to mandatory COVID vaccines. And the Holy Father reminds the faithful of the power of the Blessed Virgin. Thanks for staying with us. The U.S. Naval Academy admits it denied all vaccine-related religious exemption requests from midshipmen. The report comes as Washington dukes it out over defense spending and military vaccine mandates. Congress unveiled its $858 billion defense plan on Tuesday, with Republicans insisting it include a measure to dump the military's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. However, it is unclear how the measure would play out at the Naval Academy. And joining us tonight to discuss is Mike Berry, Director of Military Affairs for the First Liberty Institute. Mike, always great to have you on. A lot to talk about today, but first, I want to get your reaction to the report of the exemption request denials for midshipmen, and also the separate claim that some unvaxxed midshipmen are being denied their diplomas. I know you used to teach at the Naval Academy, so what do you think about all this?
Well, it's absolutely atrocious what's happening to our midshipmen. You know, there's no good reason to deny a midshipman their diploma other than to try to humiliate them, to try to punish them, just to be vindictive in nature. We've known all along that the military has basically been bragging about the fact that they are not approving any religious accommodations. I'd be curious to know how many medical or administrative exemptions the Naval Academy has granted. I'm guessing it's probably several dozen, maybe even up to 100. So it's clear that the Navy doesn't care whether a sailor or a midshipman is vaccinated. What they really care about is why the sailor or midshipman is asking for an exemption. And if your reason for asking for the exemption is religious, then they're trying to root them out and get rid of them. That's purely punitive and vindictive in nature. It's unconstitutional and it's illegal.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it looks like the annual defense bill will soon head to President Biden's desk. Republicans insist that the bill, as you know, include a plan to drop the military's vaccine mandate. Let's take a listen to what White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say.
I will note, just to be very, very clear here, what we saw, what we think happened here is Republicans in Congress have decided that they rather fight against the health and well-being of our troops than protecting them. And we believe that it is a mistake.
Mike, your reaction?
Well, it's funny that she says that, because the last time I checked, it also required Democrats to vote on the National Defense Authorization Act. I'm pretty sure that Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Schumer are going to vote on this as well. And it looks like, my understanding is it's already passed in the House and it's now on to the Senate for passage. So really the only holdup here is going to be the president himself, the commander in chief. We know that the president and the Pentagon both have gone on record as saying they oppose the lifting and the repeal of the vaccine mandate. So you have Congress, who still in this country, we still have civilian control of the military. They're essentially saying, both bipartisan, that the mandate needs to be over. It needs to be done with. It's hurting our recruiting. Our recruiting and retention are at historic lows. And yet you have the president and the Pentagon digging in their heels unnecessarily, further harming our troops, and specifically going after troops of religious faith. We know that people of faith in this country are the ones most likely, statistically speaking, to join the military. I think the president and the Pentagon know that, and those are the ones they're trying to root out and use this as some kind of ideological litmus test to get rid of people of faith from our military.
Yeah, and as I understand it, while the Republicans feel the inclusion to drop the vaccine mandate is a win, I understand it wouldn't be retroactive, so that means those service members who were already discharged won't be reinstated. Do you know more about this? And if so, what can you tell us?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we've had thousands of service members asking us, what does this mean for us now if the mandate is repealed? Unfortunately, if you've already been kicked out, if you have suffered some form of punishment or adverse action against you, it doesn't appear that the repeal of the mandate is going to be able to do anything to reinstate or provide back pay or restore you to your previous status. It's also clear, based on what the president and the Pentagon have said, is that they're already expressing or suggesting that they have the intent to try to reintroduce a new vaccine mandate. I saw one statement from a Pentagon official saying, all this does is lift the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. It doesn't prevent us from doing anything in the future. So that's why this first step is a positive step. It's a necessary step, but even more so, organizations like First Liberty Institute that have filed litigation. We secured the very first class action injunction against the military protecting service members of faith. That litigation was absolutely necessary, and it's as needed and necessary now as it's ever been to protect service members of faith.
Well, Mike, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much, as always, for coming on. We appreciate your insights, and thank you so much for your service.
Thanks for having me.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, plans for the Jordan River, how the site of Jesus' baptism could be changed, plus contemplating our Lord's birth at the Vatican's Nativity display. Welcome back. The government of Jordan has donated more than 300 acres of land to create a welcome area near the site of the baptism of Christ.
The baptism site itself is a UNESCO World Heritage protected site and will remain in its pristine condition as it has done for the past 2,000 years. The objective is to build a development zone that will provide all necessary services that are required by Christian pilgrims.
The biblical spot on the Jordan River is considered among the most holy in Christianity. As we mentioned earlier, today is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and Pope Francis reminds the faithful that Mary's full of grace also means she is free of sin.
Penso alle parole dell'angelo alla Vergine, nulla è impossibile a Dio.
At a special address to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father invited the faithful to entrust themselves to Our Lady because underneath our layers of sin, there is a greater good in all of us. And if we ask, Mary will lead us into every battle against evil and temptation. Following the tradition of the annual December 8th gifts, events that is, the Holy Father then went to the center of Rome for an act of veneration to the Immaculate Conception. After placing a bouquet of white roses at the base of the column, the Pope prayed for the intercession of the Virgin Mary to help all people in their suffering and struggles. Today's visit was his first in public in 2 years. Due to the pandemic and health safety rules, he had previously traveled there privately in the morning. Well, the Vatican is honoring the Blessed Virgin while also preparing for Christmas. Today, the Holy See opened an exhibition of several dozen nativity scenes. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thonhauser has more.
We're here in Rome at the Dicastery for Evangelization, and with me is Archbishop Rino Fisichella, who's responsible for the exhibition of nativity scenes right next to St. Peter's Square. Excellency, can you tell us a little bit why is it important to show those nativity scenes, and how do people react to that?
Well, it is necessary because it is evangelization. Just to tell you that last year, for the same edition, we had about 200,000 people coming and visiting the nativities. I think that, especially for families, is an old tradition in this country, but around all the world, is a tradition to perform nativities in our house, in our churches. But I think also is beautiful to give a public sign of that. People coming, observing, contemplating also, because nativities are beautiful. And the discovery of beauty is necessary in our time. So with the contemplation, and I use intentionally this expression, contemplating the nativities, we can understand better the mystery of our faith. There is an expression of St. Augustine. How can we say something thinking on God? We cannot say anything. We are not word when God is in our life. But we can understand God became man and he lives among us. And this is a discovery. This is the mystery of our faith. The incarnation is not God far away from us, but is not nature that we are looking for God. It is the mystery of our faith, God coming to us, meeting us, and he loves to stay with us. Nativities is the representation of this mystery of an encounter between God and mankind.
How does modern society react to the nativity scene? It's often considered as something more customary, something maybe an old tradition. What are your experiences there?
Well, you know, you turn back to be a child. This is the expression of the nativities when you perform. But for me, it's most important that we can have a transmission of that, because this is a sign also of evangelization. When the parents, the grandparents, they transmit to the children, to the family, they transmit the possibility for 1 week, for a moment, for Christmas time, to stay together around the same table, around the same nativities, and discovering again the necessity of the beauty, the necessity of faith, and why not, the necessity of hope, because the mystery of our faith is a concrete sign of hope for everybody.
And before I let you go, is there a special nativity scene, because there are many different forms of how they're being presented, that you like especially?
Mine. I received during this year many nativities as a gift for Christmas, but there is one I am particularly with a great emotion, and I prepare for my own tradition. I received the child Jesus, beautiful statue, when I was 15 years old. But every year for Christmas, this is a rite for me. I open the same box, I kiss the same Jesus, and this is my nativity. The center, the unique scene is Jesus Christ that became man for me.
Jesus at the center of the nativity. Archbishop Fisichella, thank you so much for your time. In Rome, Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.